Good afternoon, my fellow Canadian patriots. I am Mario Greco, candidate of record in Vaughan Woodbridge for the People's Party of Canada. Thank you. In April 2022, a woman was pushed onto the tracks of the TTC unprovoked by a complete stranger. Days later, I personally was stabbed in the neck unprovoked at a TTC station, also by a complete stranger. Lucky for me, it was just a mere flesh wound, as my attacker failed in his attempt to pierce my jugular right here. As I was interviewed by the news, I wished that other victims of violence would be as lucky as I was to survive with just a small scar. About a month later, a young woman was literally set on fire unprovoked near the TTC by a complete stranger. Unfortunately, in this case, she died of her injuries. A few months after that, two young women were stabbed unprovoked by a complete stranger. One of them, of whom was my age, died of her injuries. Weeks later, a homeless man was gang raided by a group of teenage girls and then was stabbed to death over a bottle of alcohol that the girls allegedly tried to steal from his friend. Now, we have a 16-year-old boy whose family immigrated from Brazil in search of a safer country to live in, who was senselessly stabbed in the chest 3 times in the TTC, also unprovoked, again by a complete stranger. He died of his injuries. Additionally, all the way in Vancouver, a man was viciously stabbed at a Starbucks after asking the attacker to avoid vaping near his child. While the stabbing took place, a man recorded him bleed to death. Another bystander ignored it as he continued to casually sip his coffee, and a TikToker took selfies in front of the dying man. What is happening? But what was the City of Toronto's response? Just hire more police. Yeah, sure, but how can police stop a stabbing that occurs within a literal span of 2 seconds? It's obvious the problem is the overwhelming increase in mental health issues. In my opinion, this rise was exacerbated by the unscientific COVID lockdowns. Yet, the government's reason for the lockdowns was to apparently save lives, even if it meant saving one life. Oh, really? According to the Canadian Institute for Health Information, despite making up a mere 3% of all COVID-19 cases, residents of Canadian long-term care homes account for 43% of all COVID-19 deaths. You call that a success? So rather than focus on protecting those most vulnerable to the virus, they instead locked our entire society down, restricted our mobility, and destroyed local businesses, while permitting free rein for giant conglomerates like Walmart and Amazon to stay wide open and make record-breaking profits as the victims in long-term care homes were neglected and died en masse. Was that the winning strategy to save lives? Or was the government embarrassed to admit their failures and their infringements over citizens' rights? But I digress. If you bring up COVID again, you'll get scoffed at and rebuked. COVID's done. Get over yourself. Oh, really? Take a look around. What issues do you see now? It's very easy to see the after effects of COVID lockdowns, and that's what we're dealing with today. People were separated from their loved ones. Communities were torn apart. People plunged into debt. People resorted to drugs and alcohol, and people have found themselves homeless. Yet, what do you see in the end? Fear, anxiety, mistrust, lies, broken home, resentment, and worse, hatred. How can we support mental health when the fabric of our society is being torn apart? You know what we can do? We can take the selfless risk to love, forgive, and help others. This world needs healing. Fear is what divides people and pits allies against each other. But seeing the humanity in the other, regardless of who they are and what they've done, will help us heal this community. Consider my attacker, Danta Easterbrook. When he attacked me completely unprovoked, he was arrested and held in jail for 5 months without receiving any bail from anyone. Which, I'm obviously glad that he's no longer in the streets to potentially hurt someone else right now, but it just went to show me that he was completely alone. He had nobody with him. I was also notified that he was a CAMH patient who suffers from schizophrenia. But they let him go, only for me to be stabbed a mere week later. Danta likely lacked that sense of community, love, and support throughout his life. So rather than look at Danta as the problem, we need to look at the system as the problem. Why CAMH failed him? Why the TTC failed him? Why our society failed him? And I'm not alone in this feeling. The 16-year-old stabbing victim's mother expressed the same thing. Rather than call the individual attackers the problem, We need to address the system causing these ills to begin with and remedy it at its core. Today, Denta is serving 10 months at a correctional institution for criminals struggling with mental health challenges. As far as I know, this institution is relatively new, so I hope that they provide him the care and medication that he needs and have an adequate shot at life again. But even then, there's still risks involved. So in my opinion, the only surefire way to properly stop violence and remedy mental health issues is to focus our care and attention on the children. As mayoral candidate and former homeless man and personal friend of mine, Mr. Kevin Clark often says, the children are the future homeless. I'd also like to add that the children are also the mentally well people. We need to focus our care and attention on the children. Unfortunately, some people will twist this noble intention and use it to teach gender theory and so-called anti-hate efforts that I argue are counterproductive, only divide children amongst each other, confuse their own humanity, and groom them to desire authoritarianism. We instead need to guide our children on what it means to show respect, regardless of who people are, how to be confident and immune to bullying rather than rely on authoritarian rule. How to love, forgive, foster healthy relationships, and see the humanity in others as well as in ourselves, as well as in themselves. And most of all, how we adults can lead by example. But one thing we must never step in the way of is letting kids be kids. Let kids be kids. This is how we heal society. By embodying love and forgiveness rather than fear as we interact with others. Even people who are the political opposite of us, and even people who seek to cause harm. Please forgive Denta and forgive people like him too. Sure, we must defend ourselves if the need arises, but that should never stop us from remembering that they're still humans made in God's image just as we are. Once we all put that goal to the forefront, we can finally build a sense of community for all people. And from there, no one will have a need for drugs. No one will have a need for violence. And no one will have a need for fear. Love is the cure. Walk with it and share it with everyone. God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario.